All right, Molly, thanks. So you hit record?
hmm
Okay. Good morning, all. Before we get started, if you're not familiar with Bales, I'd like to take a second to tell you a little bit about us. So if we jump to that slide, Jana? Okay. We have been in the eco we've been in the Infor ecosystem for over 26 years. We are entirely Infor focused. We do nothing but Infor implementations, upgrades, and managed services. We support all aspects of the technology, including S3, Landmark, and Cloud Suite, including HCM, finance, and supply chain. In fact, we have been recognized and given partnering awards in 8 of the last 10 years. Our consultants bring 15 plus years of consulting experience in this space and the equivalent in professional experience. Some are former benefit managers, compensation managers, directors of supply chain, as well as former controllers and CFOs. Class. Class is an independent organization that ranks healthcare IT performance. Bales was recognized as a top class for 2020 and 2021 in the Infor partner ecosystem. Exciting news for the Infor community. Early this year, Bales became part of Nordic, an industry-leading healthcare consulting firm. Bales will operate as a wholly owned subsidiary and continue to be led by Jamie Bales. Nordic will provide us with resources to fund our growth, expand our business, and support our customers more effectively. For healthcare customers, it allows us to bring together the Nordic's capabilities in the EHR space to provide a more holistic solution, including specific expertise in EHR and ERP integration. This combination will offer a best practice model to reduce implementation risks and leveraging the data from both systems to drive insights and outcomes. Today's session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to all registrants. If you're not registered but would like to receive the link, please email Molly Velasco at billsllc.com to request a link. Again, we'd like to thank you for joining us today, and let me turn it over to Janna. Janna, all you.
Thanks so much, Brian. Just to introduce myself, my name is Janna Hartsock. I'm a principal HCM consultant here at Bales. I've had 23 years of experience in human resources prior to going into consulting. The last 16 of that was in HRIS. I've been in consulting for 4.5 years now, the last 2 with Bales. And I've had 10 plus years of experience with the Infor HR Talent product. It's a little unusual, but I was actually part of customer number 14 to go live with GHR back in April of 2011. So it's been really fun to watch the product grow all these years, and especially excited about today's topic because this is newer functionality that folks have been looking for, and we're hoping to introduce you to. Standard disclaimer, just this material is in reference to Infor version 11. This presentation is for informational purposes only. We're trying to provide you with some considerations as you make the best decision for your organization. However, reliance on information presented without additional consultation is at your own risk, and we highly recommend that you contact Bales to discuss with us how these solutions could be tailored specifically for your needs. So we're going to take a look today at Infor's newer continuous performance engagement functionality. The slide is from last year's Inforum from a presentation one of the Infor product reps did. And I thought it was such a nice summary of the product. You know, it's the next evolution in Infor's performance management functionality. And the purpose of the continuous performance engagement functionality is to encourage more frequent and lightweight check-in conversations between employees and managers to improve performance and engagement, to help give more frequent coaching and document that and identify any kind of roadblocks to the employee's success working towards a goal or on a particular project in their organization. The pulse survey functionality can be used to solicit feedback and track engagement either by a manager or at an organizational level. The Raves allow real-time recognition employee to employee. The badges and leaderboards are available if your organization's a more competitive type and likes to display those leaderboards, and folks like to see how many badges they can get and who's got the most. And then there's some adoption and reporting analytics as well. So today we're going to take a look at how do we turn it all on, and then we'll look more in depth at the Raves and nominations setup and functionality. We'll take a look at the badges setup and functionality, check-ins, pulse surveys, and then at the end we'll have time for your questions and answers. So turning it all on. First and foremost, you need to make sure that you have the employee recognition admin underscore ST role in order to get this employee engagement role that you see at the top here and this menu that falls in below it. If you do not have this role, you will not be able to access any of the continuous performance engagement backend functionality. Second, at your org config level, you want to make sure that you turn on employee recognition down in the global HR features. That turns it on then for employees, managers, generalist administrators to be able to see these parts of the system that we're setting up. Additionally, you need to go to your configuration parameters in the administration console. So the original functionality was the Raves functionality, and when you check that employee recognition checkbox, that turns on fully. However, if you want to use badges, check-ins, or pulse surveys, you need to do this additional configuration parameter, setting it to true in all caps. There's also setups if you're using the mobile functionality for employees and managers. There's setups here where you can turn on the employee recognition functionality, which is the Raves, nominations, which is a team nomination functionality we'll take a look at, and pulse surveys. There's no checkbox on the employee setup for check-ins because that's driven by the manager. So in your mobile setup for your managers, you have the ability to enable team badges, team recognition arrays, check-ins for their team as well. So you can see several of those are checked here in addition to a couple other things. There's also some additional configuration options for the mobile setup. So check-ins have what they call a heartbeat, which is supposed to be just a very light, quick assessment of how somebody's feeling or doing that day. And the default icon is a heart. However, you do have the ability to flip it to stars or circles or gears or smileys if you're going to use that functionality. And then finally, if you have had Raves up for some time, because Raves have been out for a number of years now, they have added additional functionality to the Raves, and you may want to go look under Administrator Utilities at the customer updates and run those to do things like populating a date and time on your nomination and recognition records and populating a date and time for your Rave records, potentially. So Raves and nominations. The thought behind Raves is it's a way to recognize and boost happiness and productivity in your organization. It can be a real time when somebody happens, hey, I just want to rave about Susie because she just went the extra mile and got this report to me in a very short time frame. You know, just she's a superstar, really appreciate it. Kind of a thing. And here's some sample screenshots from the mobile perspective for Raves. You do need to set up a recognition program that can be designated as the Rave program. And these instructions and program description fields at the lower left part of the screen there are what display to an employee when they create the Rave. So it helps to promote the program, help the Rave maybe be within certain guidelines that you are using at that point in time. You can also select an award icon there. You can see star is selected, but there's a drop down to select from other icons. And again, those are going to display on the mobile. And then the program levels are if you're going to use your leaderboards to specify different thresholds to show on the leaderboards as people accrue different raves from people in the organization. Recognition categories will help change the color of the icon selected. So in this example, you see accountability has been set up to be blue. And so if you were using the star, it would show as a blue star for accountability versus if somebody selected a category of excellence, it would show as amber or yellow, orange color. Additionally, you need to go into the employee recognition configuration in employee engagement role and identify which program is going to be your current Rave program. So all that pulls together to getting you to this screen. This is from the computer perspective, not the mobile perspective. If somebody went in and wanted to make a rave about somebody, this is the screen that would be presented to them. They could select the employee, they could select the recognition category, they can enter comments, they can even enter attachments if there's something relevant. And then you can see this add additional. They can recognize multiple people if there were several folks involved. Clicking this, adding this, will give you additional names in here, and then you can configure emails to be generated at the point the rave is submitted, and so you can add in CCs here. It says, please note your comments will be shared with direct managers and possibly beyond, and then you can add in additional CCs that are relevant for this particular rave so everybody knows about it immediately. So when you have made a rave, this is from the manager perspective on a computer, not mobile again, in their engagement dashboard. There are these different tiles. So they've got check-ins, and part of the check-ins are accomplishments, challenges, and open tasks. And then here is the rave tile. So they could see if they clicked on a particular employee, they could see the most recent rave that that employee has received and view that. The employee sees a similar engagement dashboard. Obviously, they're just going to see their own stuff. And so on the Raves Received tile, they would see a rave that they had received from somebody. The email templates, I copied out the variables that you're given for these email templates just because I want to show you just how powerful they are. So there are two different templates you can set up in Raves. There's a recognized by email template that's used to send emails to the employee that is submitting the Raves about coworkers. And then there's a recognized employee email template that's used to send emails to the actual employee being recognized. And you can see that there's just a lot of variables. It's a really powerful communication tool that Infor has built here. And there's even a way to do custom variables if there's something you wanted to include in the email text that's not here. And where do you set up those emails? So in the employee engagement role under Raves setup and recognition program, there is an email tab. Right now this is set for no emails, but you can see the recognized by and the recognized employee email template. If we were to set this to automatic email, these would then be open to drop templates in that we had created. And a final note about Raves, you can include them in the more traditional appraisal. So the performance management module, which many of you are familiar with, was designed to give a more formal assessment at specific increments, whether it was an annual increment or every 6 months or once a quarter. Kind of pull a bunch of pieces of information together, goals, and if you're evaluating competencies and you have activities you've completed, there's a whole bunch of sections, as you can see here, that are available to set up the more traditional appraisal form with, and they have added in almost all of the continuous performance engagement sections here. You won't see badges, that one's not entered, and you'll see why in a minute when we look at badges, but check-ins, raves, and pulse surveys are all possible to be pulled into a more traditional appraisal form. The nomination program is kind of a group extension of the Raves. It's for team awards, and it's really only accessible through the mobile. Right now, in the June-July 2021 release of this year, the mobile Nominate Someone button was added into the awards widget to make it more consistent with the Raise functionality in the mobile app. And you can have up to 5 questions in your nomination program. So I'm showing you 3 here, but you set up, the policy for team awards and have the questions listed here. And then there's a place on the back end for the engagement administrator to review those nominees and to move them forward. Are they a finalist? Are they eliminated? They're not eligible for some reason? Or do they become an actual awardee, as well as keep track of award certificates that you can design using that rich text format functionality where it you drop in variables to pull in to make that nicely personalized certificate. Your nomination templates, nomination award templates are the certificates that can be given to employees who've received awards from the nomination. As I said, it could be created as a PDF or a rich text format document. The PDF obviously won't be able to pull in variables. It'll be a more static document versus the rich text format file will allow names, dates, names of programs, etc. to drop into it. So this is what nominating a coworker would look like. And again, because this is team and orientation, it's got, 3 to start with. Clicking this add additional coworkers to nomination checkbox will give you an additional 12 boxes that you can put up to 12 more people in. And here's the question, what was the issue? This is a lead the way forward program. So we're recognizing a team that had an issue, had a solution, and led the company or organization forward in resolving this issue with their solution. So here's kind of what it looks like on the back end where it's been submitted. The issue, we've got a bunch of cats in our demo environment. So the issue is rats were overtaking the warehouse. They doubled up on night shift when the rats were more active, and they volunteered themselves to pilot the program and work out the kinks in the process before asking others to step in. And here's all those involved with that particular initiative. And nomination email templates are also available. Again, they're used to send emails to employees who are nominated for the awards program in that team nomination program. And here are the variables currently delivered. Again, if there's something you want included that's not a delivered variable, there is a way. Ask Bales to get the custom variable included as well in that email template. And here's just the backend configuration. On the nomination program itself, on the templates tab, you would say whether you wanted an email or not to go to these 3 categories and drop that email template in. And here's the certificate that you could drop in as well. And as I did say, the awards can be included in your more traditional appraisals in this using this create award section. So nice way to recognize somebody quarterly, semi-annually, annually, show the awards that they received during that time period. Badges. Badges are also sometimes referred to as a passport. It's a certificate that can be added by a supervisor to an employee profile. It recognizes achievements in training, education, and other disciplines within an organization. Pretty much whatever you want to set up, you can recognize with a badge. There's a point system you can set up to be allotted to each badge to motivate your employees and encourage some friendly competition, potentially, for them to achieve point totals. They can also be used to recognize some major achievements and milestones. You can align the badges to your organization's core values and have them be designated by the human resources team. Badges such as years of service or completion of training courses are kind of the most typical usage that we've seen of these. Administrators and managers can use badges to recognize their employees' achievement in training, education, and other disciplines within an organization. The employee badges feature is now visible on the new employee preview profile. So not the older employee space setup, but if you are flipping to the newer employee preview look and feel, you'll be able to see badges delivered there along with a count of total badges earned and a link to the employee badge form. And again, if your organization has a culture of friendly competition, there is a leaderboard that can also be displayed for folks to kind of see where each other are and kind of challenge each other to do better and earn more badges. There's a little additional setup on the administrator side. This isn't found in that employee engagement role. So this is set up over under administrator, setup structure. You'll see badges, and you can set up a badge group and family And you can see here we've got service awards set up with 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 15 year. And here's just a closer look at the badge family setup. You can also add colors to it so that folks kind of recognize a little more instinctively once they get used to the color scheme. You'll need to add the badge family names here, and that will display, especially in the mobile employee aspect with the color for the badge icon. And you can always update the color if you change your mind. Administrators can also assign levels to their badges by creating a badge group, as we saw, and it will automatically sequence the badge to the next level in the group when you're adding them in, but you can rearrange them to get them to the right order. So if you come back and now you want to recognize 2 years of service, it initially would drop in possibly at the end of this list, and then this display order columns here you see current, and you can update the new and hit save, and it'll flip them around to get that 2nd year anniversary in between 1 and 5 years, for example. So here's an example of some badges we uploaded into our demo environment for the anniversary awards. You've got 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 15 year. This is what would display to the employee, so you can get creative with it. And then here, under Administrator Setup Structure, again, you can select the status of the badge. Obviously, in the status field, you can choose active for badges that can be currently earned, and you can flip it to inactive if it's no longer a badge or sequence of badges that you're using. The status of retired can be used for badges that are no longer issued, but employees would retain if previously granted, whereas inactive would actually turn them off. So, make sure it's something you really don't want to display anymore if you are going to inactivate it, or just flip it to retired if it's just something that's no longer being kind of actively awarded. And in the point value field, you can specify a point value for that particular badge's level of importance. And you can see there's ability to upload both small and large icons. I happen to upload the same icon into both, but you could have 2 different versions so that the screen resolution would look better on a mobile device potentially versus a laptop. And then here's, if you're going in through the application on a computer, here's where you would find the badges to view on the employee's profile. So this is either as an administrator or generalist or a manager. You have this profile page with the at a glance tab, and you would have this link here that you could click on to view their badges. In the mobile versions, it's a tile for employees and managers to click on called My Badges for the employee and Team Badges for the managers. And it would open up to something like this. So you could see, oh, I've got one employee that has 4 badges and one that just has 3. And you can click on that link and it'll then display the actual badges awarded to that employee. You can also manually assign these. There are several ways you can assign badges. So manual assignment from the back end as an administrator, you can go into the resources employee profile, and on the all action menu, if you have badges enabled, you'll have this assign badge action. That will then give you a lookup screen where you can click on that lookup icon and find the badge you're looking for and submit it. As delivered, managers can only view the badges that their team members have received through the computer application here. There is an ability to mass assign badges. So say you have the service award badges and you want to make sure you're keeping on top of, as soon as somebody hits their 1 year anniversary, you're awarding them that badge, and it's not something manual that you have to do. You do have the option here to do kind of a one-time if you want to submit, but also to schedule, and to schedule that to run, maybe once a night to look at, this is a custom group here, this badge employee group, and see, does today's date equal 365 days from, their start date? And if so, award them the 1-year badge. You also can mass assign a few employees at the same time, up to 8 employees. But typically I would think you'd want more of the scheduled mass assignment for things like service awards so that everybody's getting that in a timely manner. And just as I mentioned before, there is no section on the more traditional appraisal for pulling in those badges that they've earned. Okay, so moving on to check-ins, which I think is what most folks are more immediately interested in. Your check-ins, again, are the functionality is to encourage those frequent, lightweight check-in conversations to help improve performance and engagement of your employees and to facilitate more frequent coaching and resolving of any kind of roadblocks the employees running into. So there's a little bit of additional setup for check-ins besides all the turning on we did at the beginning. You do need to create an engagement period, whether that's a year, 6 months, 5 years, that's up to your definition of the engagement period. And then you do need to assign that engagement period for it to be visible to your employees and managers to then attach check-ins to. We'll take a look at the preferences that you have a couple options on. And then there's a couple optional setups that are behind the scenes that aren't delivered on the form, but you could easily through Configuration Console add meeting categories and meeting types to the forms to help give a little better definition to what the check-in is for. When you go into the employee engagement homepage, you're going to see these quick links. And some of these things are not on the menu on the left. So it's really important to make sure that you're seeing the full set of quick links here because engagement period creation and assignment is only done through these 2 links here. We had an experience where a client was using an older configurable homepage that hadn't been updated with these links, and so we had to go back and update their configurable homepage with the most current version to then see all 9 quick links up here and the 4 across the bottom to be able to set these up. So just a note for those of you that maybe have had a configurable homepage up for a little bit, you may need to reevaluate that, revisit that a little bit, and look at the most current version. Creating the engagement period is relatively simple, just giving it a begin and an end date. You'll see the title engagement years, but the main title is engagement period because they've come to recognize it may not be like a full year. You may have a campaign for 6 months to do check-ins about one thing that you wanted to show under, and then you start a new engagement program for check-ins, for another 6-month period. One organization set it up for 2 or 5 years because they just wanted it to be continuous. They didn't want there to be a start and end date. They want managers to just go in and do check-ins, and they'll they had an archive strategy for some of the older ones year to year. But just know you have flexibility with that period definition. And then this assign engagement period just lets you pull up the engagement period you're assigning and click submit to go ahead and send it out. Employees and managers will not be able to see their check-ins if this has not been assigned to them. They'll go into the engagement dashboard and they won't see any tiles there. So you do have to remember to do this assignment process as well. And then the check-in preferences give you some helpful kind of functionality behind the scenes here. So check-in needed threshold. What is the recommended guideline you're giving your managers for having check-ins with employees? Is it, every week? Is it every 7 days? Is it every 14 days? Every 2 weeks? Is it once a month? So every 30 days? And what this does is it triggers some alerts on manager space as well as the back end that if somebody is outside of that threshold period, and have not had a check-in within that window, that, hey, they really need you need to have a check-in with your employee per our kind of recommended guidelines of having them every so many days kind of thing. So that can be helpful to just kind of prompt their managers when they're in manager space to see that and, oh yeah, I need to do a check-in with that employee. There's also, we talked about this kind of custom scale for the heartbeats. You can change the icons. You can use your own custom scale if you don't want to use the delivered icons. And then it also gives you the options. Maybe you're just using check-ins and accomplishments right now. You're not ready to roll out challenges and tasks to your managers. So you just want those two tiles to show in your engagement dashboard. Maybe you're not using goals right now, but I really appreciate that they put display goals in here because so often the check-ins are about your goals. And so having a tile with the goals there is very helpful for managers to kind of have everything in one place for the discussion. And then this check-in prompt, we were struggling a little bit to figure this out, and I had the question there, is this for mobile? And the answer came back, no, this is actually what shows up on a consolidated appraisal. So if you're pulling check-ins into the more traditional performance appraisal and you're generating a consolidated appraisal off of that, this check-in prompt freeform text here is what will show for the first question in the check-in, which will make more sense in a minute when you see an actual check-in. And then these are these two fields that I mentioned are kind of behind the scenes. They're not on the check-in form, but easily configured in meeting category. You could have categories of development versus work goals versus, career aspirations. And you could have further definition with a meeting type as well. So if this is reviewing work goals, is this our monthly goal review? Is this our semi-annual goal review? Different types within there. First quarter, second quarter, third quarter. So here's what it looks like from the manager perspective. The engagement dashboard has a list of their employees down the left, and then these various tiles for all the pieces that we've looked at. One note is that as delivered right now, the check-ins can only be initiated by managers. They cannot be initiated by employees. Infor has had that request and has it on their development list is my understanding, but right now just using delivered functionality, only your managers can actually initially create these check-ins. And then that populates, depending on which sections you're using, it'll populate something in each of these tiles that you can click into and treat individually. And you can see for an open task, you have the ability to complete it and set a date for the completion to keep track of that. And it'll fall off this open task tile. Similarly with open challenges, you have the ability to click resolve and it falls off the open challenges and you have a date there of when that was resolved to kind of keep track of. Note the link to the attachment here. If you attached anything in your check-in, it shows up here that you can kind of easily click on this link to get back into that document. And then the red circle exclamation point here is indicating that this is a check-in that the employee has yet to acknowledge. So still waiting for that employee acknowledgement of the check-in. So here's the check-in form when the manager initiates that, and you can see that it's defaulting these three areas. Additionally, in addition, this is the question one area, which you can configure this to say, anything you want. It can be, what are you hoping to talk about in this check-in, or what as delivered it says please enter information about your resource, but this label can be configured. Here's that heartbeat where manager could just say like, this is where I think the employee's at right now, and then the employee has you kind of keep track of that over time. And then here are these additional sections, tell us about your employee's accomplishment, tell us about your challenges, enter a new task with a due date, and attach any attachments that are relevant to this particular check-in. On the employee side then, once the check-in's been created, they'll go in and they'll see the engagement periods that have been assigned to them over the years. So if you've had this up for a couple of years, you might have, multiple engagement periods. And they'll see the most current check-ins, accomplishments, challenges, and tasks here, as well as Raves if they receive them, submitted. We'll get into pulse surveys in a minute, but they can, from here, they can double click to open. And this initial question here is the only component that an employee can update. The accomplishments, challenges, and tasks as delivered are only editable by the manager, but either the manager or the employee can click on those resolve and complete buttons we looked at and close those out. However, only the employee can actually acknowledge the check-in, and you can see that acknowledge box here as they've opened it up. They would also have a place just on the screen on the tile there to click acknowledge if it was something they had viewed already but forgotten to acknowledge. They don't have to go all the way back in to do that. And just a note on the manager's editing ability, we've found that it depends on the way that you click. So if you just double click on the card in that tile, what comes up is not editable. So it'd be a point of training for your managers that they need to click on the arrow and then double click on what comes up next to get to this more editable form. Can do some configurations around that as well. But this is because of the architecture. The accomplishments, check-ins, challenges, and tasks are all separate business classes. And so you're viewing them through one business class and you have to kind of get back to the other business class to get to the editable form. Email notifications available for letting employees know they have a check-in, as well as letting them know that they need to acknowledge something. So you can schedule these to run to notify your employees whenever they have a check-in. Schedule them once a night, once an hour, whatever is your preference. You do need to define an eligibility group to look for, so you're not sending emails to people maybe that are on leave or obviously terminated folks either. And then you have, this is a standard email template that you have to define. And there is integration with the more traditional performance review for the check-ins. So you can create a check-in section, you can put some text here, and you can tell it, maybe you just want to include that first box of the check-in. Maybe you want to include that and their accomplishments, but you don't want to have tasks, a laundry list of tasks or challenges. Because something of note here, you can, from this engagement dashboard, you can actually create, you see these plus signs in all these tiles, you can create separate just accomplishments. I just want to add an accomplishment, so I have that documented, or I want to add a challenge. It isn't necessarily tied to a full-on check-in. The check-in form gives you the opportunity to do all of those at the same time, but you're not limited to that. You can enter in additional tasks, challenges, and accomplishments. So there's configurability there with the more traditional appraisal form where you can say, well, which of those would you like to include on your performance form? Last but not least, we've got the pulse surveys. Pulse surveys give a chance for employees and managers to respond to questions and can potentially break up a cumbersome appraisal process, make it a little more flexible throughout the year to just get a quick pulse on things. There's only two things additionally that you have to set up pulse surveys. One is a library of questions, individual questions, and then creating a particular program. The pulse survey questions can be any kind of response, a short text, long text, just a yes, no, or a yes, no with a text, or you can create a list for them to select from. So it gives your employees a chance to react to topics or give you periodic feedback. Managers can use these to increase team collaboration and help guide employee development. However, responses are not anonymous. So I had one organization that really wanted to use this for HR to get a pulse on things without managers knowing who responded what, and HR really didn't want to know. It was replacing some SurveyMonkey functionality that they had had. So we hid the pulse survey functionality from managers so that they couldn't see what their individual team members' responses were. But obviously the employees still needed it to be able to respond, and the manager would have access themselves through their employee space. So just something to keep in mind as delivered, this is not an anonymous functionality. And just a little more insight into the setup. So here's a question that I've got, just a pulse survey program with one question. What kind of training would help you? Versus you can have multiple questions in a program. Just know that when you do this mass assigned questions action, it only sends one pulse survey question at a time. So you either have to go back in the next day if you want it to go right away, then you just mass assign several times in a row to get each question out to the employee. Or maybe you want to give, employees a day to respond, and just come back in the next day and click mass assign, or you can schedule it. So much of the functionality is possible there in the system. So you can schedule it to just once a night, go through and send out the next question. So you don't have to go back and think about that. So here's that schedule. And one thing that's great about the pulse survey schedule functionality is it is checking each time to see, is that employee eligible for this pulse survey question? So if somebody has termed since the first or second question went out, or they're now on leave and you don't want to bother them because they may not be back for 3 or 4 months, it'll identify that and only send them out if they meet that eligibility. There is the ability to individually assign pulse survey questions. So maybe you've got a new hire that came in and you sent the pulse survey out last week, but you're still collecting responses. You want to include that new hire. You can go into in the employee engagement role under Pulse, you can find employees in the program. You can just right click and assign a particular question to that employee to get them caught up. And then, of course, there's a way on the back end to review pulse survey responses, and you can always export them to CSV so that you can kind of aggregate responses, maybe do a pivot table on it, or just, tally up similar responses to give that feedback then to and report off of that feedback to your higher ups potentially. The printed PDF is never my favorite option because you can't do a lot with that. So I prefer the CSV to give me data that I can sort and move around and do pivot tables off of if I want. And as mentioned before, these pulse surveys are also integrated with the traditional review. So you do have the ability to pull this in, and you have the option. Do you just want to pull in employee responses, pulse survey sent out to your employee population, or do you also want to pull in a pulse survey that a manager has sent out to their team or not into here? Phew, and that is it. Are there any questions?
I don't see any in the chat.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, just so you know, today's our last Informative Fridays webinar for this quarter. We do have one more session right after this one at 1 o'clock Eastern. Really fun financial section, Ask Me Anything. We've been soliciting questions from folks through our social media posts and have some great feedback from current clients as to common questions that they've had on the financial system. So if you are using Infor Finances, you will definitely want to attend this to get a lot of really great information, commonly asked questions and issues that people have had in the finance system. And our next quarterly Informative Friday series will start in February. So if you haven't, didn't mean to click that. If you haven't already connected with us on social media, be sure to follow us on either LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or Work Out Loud if you're an Infor community member there on Work Out Loud. And that way you will be in the know when we start making announcements for registration for our series in February. And finally, we have a Coffee with Consultants program. It's our chance to give you 30 minutes with one of our consultants on the topic of your choice. You can ask a question or ask us to demo a particular system feature or look at a part of a system. Maybe there's something you're just stuck on a little bit and you just would love to run it by somebody with a little more technical background than you. We can hook you up, and feel free to connect with us about this either through our website or you can email Molly Velasco directly and she'll be glad to make that connection for you. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for attending. If there aren't any other questions, I think we'll give you guys a few minutes before our 1 o'clock.
Thank
Great.
you, Janna. Really
Thanks,
nice job.
Janna. Yeah, great job.
Excellent. My pleasure.
Thanks, Janna.
All right.